Good morning. Last year, 2019, was a humbling one for me in one unforgettable way. I lost a chess match for the first time to my then 10-year-old son. He'd been playing chess for a while and he joined a chess club at school. We'd been playing for a few years and initially I'd won pretty easily, as you might expect. For much of 2019 though, the matches had been getting closer and closer. I rescued victory from the jaws of defeat on several occasions. Whenever I managed this, I was elated. There was much woo-hooing, crowing and exultation on my part. My son, though, was never too downcast. Instead, he'd study the board, learn from his errors and figure out how to beat me next time. Then it happened. It was one Sunday afternoon. After a long game, he uttered the word, "Checkmate." I looked at the board, scarcely able to believe it. He eyeballed me, smiled, reached out his hand and said, "Good game." It was this moment of grace that I wanted to talk about today. Remember, every time I'd beaten him, I'd been giving it a lot of yes! My son, 10 years old, taught me a lot that afternoon. He taught me about how to win with humility, just as he taught me a fair bit about losing with dignity. Many of you will know the poem If by Rudyard Kipling. It's consistently been voted one of the UK's favourite poems. One of the most famous bits from it is the line, "If you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same." These lines say a lot about how we should approach winning and losing. It is, perhaps, no coincidence that these lines are written on the wall of the players' entrance to Wimbledon's centre court. They speak of being able to win with humility and lose with dignity. Sport is one of the areas that we often think about when it comes to winning and losing. We often talk about the probably now outmoded word sportsmanship to describe playing sport with the right attitude. Tennis is a really good example of this. Perhaps the two greatest tennis players of all time, Rafa Nadal and Roger Federer, are held up as sporting in their attitudes to the game. 40 Grand Slams between them, and yet it is their attitude, perhaps rather than their abilities, that marks these two players out as ones for the ages. One of the reasons for this is that they win with humility and they lose with dignity. Roger Federer was a famously grumpy teenager. Tantrums abounded on the court. Now though, there is no one more elegant in all of sport. He wins, he loses, and he manages to stay calm. I've never heard Rafael Nadal offer an excuse for a loss. Instead, he will always compliment his opponent on how well they've played. Even when it was evident that he himself was injured, he never blamed a loss on injury. Instead, he says thank you, puts his head down, and gets on with recovering, learning, and improving. What does this tell us about how to accept losses in life? I think it lets us know that the first thing we must do when we've lost is accept responsibility. It is easier to blame everything on things happening around you. It is easier to talk about poor refereeing or the luck of the opposition player and so on. However, ultimately every loss in life must, in part, be the fault of the loser. So the first lesson in how to lose is accept responsibility. What's the next? Treat the victor with courtesy and respect. This is an incredibly hard thing to do. War perhaps allows us to see where this has happened in the past. In the 3rd century BC, ancient Rome was defeated in a succession of battles by one of the greatest tacticians in all military history, Hannibal Barca. If you believe the sources, then more men were lost on the day of his victory against the Romans at Cannae in 216 BC than on any other day in history. Perhaps 3 or 4 times as many as died on the first day of the Somme in 1916. Hannibal was hugely skilled in the art of war, but ultimately he he lost. He's one of the most famous losers in history. He lost to a man called Scipio Africanus at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC, and he ended his life as an exile, taking poison to avoid being captured by the Romans. Shortly before his death, he apparently met Scipio in person, the man who had defeated him, remember. Scipio asked Hannibal who, in all history, he thought was the greatest general ever. Hannibal named Alexander the Great, then another Greek general, Pyrrhus, and then finally himself. Scipio laughed and said, "Well, what would you say if you defeated me?" Hannibal's response shows him to be a wonderfully gracious loser. He replied, "Then, beyond doubt, I should place myself before all other generals." He compliments his victor, the man who had laid him and his country low. It is elegant, it is graceful, and it speaks volumes about Hannibal as someone able to lose with dignity. There is one more lesson to learn from losing. Don't give up. Sport, once again, gives us a brilliant example of this. Catherine Granger is a world-class athlete. She is Britain's most decorated female Olympian. For a long time, though, it looked as if she would be one of the great runners-up, one of the great losers. She won silver medals at 3 successive Olympics: Sydney 2000, Athens 2004, Beijing 2008. When she lost for the third time, she was in floods of tears on the victory rostrum. She was 32 years old, and it may have appeared that her chances of getting that gold medal were gone. She kept working hard and won the Olympic gold at the 4th time of asking in 2012 at our home Olympics in London at the age of 36. She kept on rowing and won another Olympic silver at the age of 40 in Rio de Janeiro. She is a truly inspirational figure. She never gave up. She learned from every single defeat and is a model of resilience. At the same time as being an Olympic athlete, she managed to pick up 2 degrees and a doctorate. Now she's the chair of UK Sport, Chancellor of Oxford Brookes University, and a Dame. If she'd managed to win first time out in 2000, would she hold all of these positions, and would she have achieved so much? I doubt it. She's an inspiration because she had to work at her success. She had to learn from failure. She's resilient because she, in her own mind at least, didn't quite win until that gold medal was round her neck in 2012. So then, when we lose, we should accept responsibility. We should treat the winner with courtesy, and we should learn a lot about ourselves in the process of losing, building our own resilience. You learn more about yourself when the chips are down, when you fail, than you do from a string of successes. If you can learn those lessons whilst also being gracious, then all to the good. Winning is great though. No one likes losing. Even though we might take away an awful lot from it, we know that the feeling of victory is wonderful and infinitely preferable to the crushing disappointment of losing. I've said that I think we should all learn to lose with dignity, but we should equally learn to win with humility. Those people who win with humility attain a much greater level of respect from others and probably manage to feel a lot better about themselves. You may well remember the famous image of Andrew Flintoff consoling the Australian cricketer Brett Lee at the end of the greatest test match ever, Edgbaston 2005. It is this moment, rather than any chest-beating, fist-pumping heroics, that will surely be the photo that accompanies Flintoff's obituary. He'll be remembered as someone who was sporting in how he approached life. Winning wasn't the only thing. In winning, he looked to his defeated rival and thought about them. He cared about the loser. There's a great lesson in humility there. Humility can be shown in the smallest of things. Think about every time you've gotten a test result back in school and done well. Have you celebrated it publicly? Now think about how that made the person next to you who didn't do quite as well feel. Or did you simply smile at the result, read through the paper, try to learn how to do even better next time, and put it away quietly? Think about the whole concept of the flex on social media. The post which is carefully crafted to make you look awesome. There's no humility there. In fact, there's the opposite. There's pride, smugness, and vanity. Is that the sort of person you want to be? Older people like me don't really do Snapchat or TikTok to flex. We do it on Facebook. I don't use Facebook anymore. I realised a few years ago that all I was doing was posting pictures and stories about how great my life was, even when it wasn't. I didn't even post anything about the fact that I'd had a rubbish day, if I'd had. It was all a means of me just showing people how successful I was and how things were going brilliantly. I'm much happier now that I'm a little more honest, both with myself and with others. We tend to admire people who win with humility, and we should certainly admire those who lose with dignity. We can learn lessons from winning and from losing. We can learn about the sort of person we might like to be and the sort of person we might like others to see us being. How we respond to triumph and disaster tells us so much about ourselves. Keep trying to win, but win well and win with humility. When you lose, lose with dignity and learn all you can from it. I'll keep trying to win in my chess matches with my son, and when I do, then I'll be careful to be humble in victory. When I lose, though, I'll try and learn some lessons for next time. I found a great prayer that I think says a lot about triumph and disaster, from a man who encountered both in his fairly long life, St. Augustine. Lord, I commit my failures as well as my successes into your hands, and I bring for your healing the people and the situations, the wrongs and the hurts of the past. Give me courage, strength, and generosity to let go and move on, leaving the past behind me and living the present to the full. Lead me always to be positive as I entrust the past to your mercy, the present to your love, and the future to your providence. Have a great weekend.